Welcome to the American Academy of Grief Counseling's Videogram on non-finite grief and human happiness. And in this, we're going to look a little bit at the ontology of happiness, the science itself of happiness, the philosophy of happiness, and what makes someone truly happy, because this correlates directly with the idea of non-finite grief, or something that is extremely abstract. So when we look at a grief that is untouchable, really ungraspable, and unidentifiable sometimes, others might consider that to be a form of depression. But the reality is something isn't right in life. Something is missing. And we refer to this as a void in the soul. So in this fallen world that we exist in, humanity is always looking to fill that void. Humanity is looking to find what will give the soul happiness, what will give life of complete fulfillment. So in that life, there's always that search for what is going to make the individual feel complete. So the question then is, what is that end? What is that thing that makes a person completely happy, that fills that void completely? Is it in material things? Many individuals search their whole life for things to fill emptiness in their heart. Maybe they don't have many social relationships, or they find being at the top of everyone's list in terms of what one has, being the envy of everyone, having the fastest car, the nicest looking car, the best job, the most money, the bigger paycheck. In terms of maybe decorating their home with the finest furnishings, having the most up-to-date technology, the finest jewelry, the best clothes. And these are things that ultimately give a temporary joy. Obviously, the soul responds to them with a joy. But in the end, these things do not complete an individual. First, they're material, and that they can be lost, they can be taken, they're not permanent, they can break. And in this reality, individuals discover that without it to share, without it to look beyond the status of possessing, an individual is still very empty and alone with these material things. So in that human quest of happiness, the individual looks for things that might be more fulfilling, that gives that soul, that gives the human soul that little bit of jolt of happiness, instead of the negativity, the sting of unsatisfaction or pain or suffering. So the human soul looks more than just the initial joy, the initial ring within the soul, but something deeper. And that's when we start understanding that means should never become ends. And many material things are means to ends. Money is a means to be able to put food on the table. Food in itself becomes a mean for overall health. So it's very important in human happiness to interpret what a mean is and what the ultimate end is. So what is a human being's ultimate end in this fallen world where loss and grief can occur? Obviously, it's not in these material things that we see, because they can be taken, they can be stolen. They're only temporary in terms of giving joy. They are means to an end, never the end itself. So some look for relationships, and indeed, fostering relationships is a far higher mean than material possessions. But if faith and all your hope is placed in a relationship with someone, what we discover is that relationships break because people are imperfect. Relationships sometimes lead to divorce. Relationships sometimes lead to arguments. Friendships are broken in various relationships. Some individuals have poor relationships even with their parents or their siblings. And what if the ultimate relationship ender occurs, in which an individual spouse or parent or child is taken through death? So these things, as good as they are, as beautiful as they can be, are still like material things to an extent, although placed in a higher value. They are still nonetheless subject to imperfection in this world. They are still subject to being taken away through death or other human error. And in that, suffering, sadness can creep in and take over. So is there something higher? Should we more look towards philosophical ideals and spiritual pursuits? Will this answer the quest of happiness that so many seek? Virtue in itself. Is virtue in it? And the ancient philosophers, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, all within that school of thought, looked at virtue as something extremely important, extremely valuable to the individual, but also to society itself. But again, as important it is to have a moral compass, to live a virtuous life, that's a means to something as well. And as we've seen, also many individuals fall short of their virtuous pursuits. So individuals then look to fulfill the soul at an even higher level. And the soul itself can find joy in looking for things beyond this world. Now, if an individual is not spiritual, maybe they can be found in worldviews that make sense, that make this existence make sense. And what turns out is that everything we do leads to that ultimate moment of the purpose of existence, to giving to this world and adhering to something that is bigger than ourselves, that can never be taken away, that can never be broken, that can never not satisfy. Now, for individuals beyond a worldview, they have within their spirituality the belief in a deity or a divine being. And in that, many creeds teach of a perfect world hereafter, one that is filled with love, that is never taken away. Now, maybe some within the temporal, secular world might consider that a fantasy, while others might consider it a pursuit just for those with less empirical minds. But it is still nonetheless one, philosophically at least, that holds to the qualities that one would look for to fill the ultimate emptiness within the soul, because it leads to something that is attainable in the next world, that is attainable to the point where happiness can never be stolen. It can never be taken away. It is in itself an end. Your virtues lead to this. So it's not a self-seeking philosophy that looks for means to find happiness in, but it actually looks for a particular end in itself that is complete, that can never fail. So when we're looking for happiness, it has to be beyond just the tangible. There has to be something more to humanity, something more than what is touchable, something more than what can be taken away. So there are tiers, there are ladders of happiness, starting with the most fundamental needs of meeting, clothing, feeding oneself, caring for oneself, and then other material needs as you walk up that hill, so to speak, and ultimately leading to a happiness that, if put into proper perception with other lower levels of happiness, gives one a general idea. Now, what we'll discover is many individuals in their quest for happiness, they look for different things, different isms of happiness, other than in the ultimate end, whether it's a worldview or a divine being, and they get sidetracked and they try to make a means a particular end, and it only leads in heartbreak if that becomes the ultimate end in their particular life. And within that comes a type of rain cloud over their entire existence as they search for that elusive happiness, which they haven't been able to find. So within this, we start to look at an abstract type of grief called infinite grief, something that's not very tangible, but something that is gnawing at the very soul itself. So these individuals may not be experiencing a particular loss directed to something that has happened. There might not be a direct source. There might just be a general sense of melancholy, a general sense of something is off, something not fulfilled. And it is, again, gnawing at their existential reality of what they want in life. And we've listed a few over here: the road not traveled, the career not fulfilled, the child never had, the injury that prevented something greater, or even the envy of someone else. So certain schemas or certain life goals do not match the reality of the particular individual and how they are existing right now. Maybe someone wished they were married as well, and they're not married. So they look back and they think about these things, and these things torture them. And not necessarily we're looking at individuals who are selfish or envious to the point of malice. We may not even be thinking necessarily of individuals who are not grateful for what they might possess, but they still feel a genuine sorrow for something that is lacking in their very life itself. It's an intangible type of grief. So if we wish to help oneself in understanding non-finite grief, or if as grief counselors we look to help individuals through this messy process, we need to understand a few important aspects of it. First and foremost, sadness always needs addressed, and any emotion needs to be validated. So as you sit alone, maybe thinking about something that could have been or should have been, or what if, you might begin to wonder about other paths. And it might even make you a little sad that a certain path didn't go a particular way. It is okay to validate these emotions. It's good to answer to these emotions. Now, it's not necessarily wise maybe to allow them to overtake, but they definitely need to be addressed, and they need to be validated in that it's okay to have these types of feelings. And ultimately, as you analyze these types of what ifs or should have beens, you start to wonder if chasing ghosts or certain things can ever really satisfy you. Is it benefiting your state of mind? Are these desires still attainable? Or are they ultimately trivial, or something that seemed to be much more of value then as it is now? Is it worthy of a search or change? So some individuals might validate their emotions and say, I did not achieve that degree I always wanted, and they will then go to school. Now, again, realizing that going to school is a good pursuit, it has many values in it, but it's not an end in itself. It's a means to opening oneself up to greater education, possible better financial situations, better status, and so forth. So again, it's just a ladder in happiness, but it is also a route that one can choose, or it could very well be a route that one does not choose in regards to a relationship, maybe. So it's important sometimes to find value in the road that was traveled. There might not be everything that was expected in traveling this particular road, but there are a lot of good things that did come with it, a lot of good things that did come out of it. So in that, there's a gratitude for what one has, and then there's also an analyzation of what if and could have, should have, if they are worthy of continued pursuit or not, or if there can be a middle ground found. It is important also to understand what can you control. If a relationship not pursued has led to another individual in a fruitful relationship, marriage, and children, then of course the individual is going to have to accept some of these realities and just begin to look elsewhere. So it's important to place happiness in things worthy of happiness and understand the realities that are tied to things in this world as they relate to us. It is never wrong to feel upset maybe about some of these things that cause us grief that maybe didn't work out the way we wanted, especially for individuals approaching maybe middle age as they start to look back, but also look forward. So it is important to understand that these things do not have to necessarily dictate our future. They just remind us of what we might have wanted at a certain time, and that we're kind of uneasy with how things turned out, but it doesn't have to define who we are now and where we choose to go from here out. So when you come across an individual, or if you are yourself an individual suffering from a type of infinite grief, just thinking about what should have been done or could have been done or what ifs, start thinking instead about who you are now, understand the good and the bad that comes with that, the gratitude for maybe what you have and then what you might have missed out on, and start thinking about real concrete change that is worthy maybe of pursuing. And if not pursuing, to start to find some value in who you are right now so that you can build a better future instead of allowing these emotions, which should be validated, but these emotions nonetheless that might be running a little too wild and preventing you from enjoying the present itself. We at AIHCP offer a grief counseling certification. Below is the link, as well as the email at info@aihcp.org, and as well as our number at 330-652-7776. So you can contact us. Qualified professionals can earn a grief counseling certification if they wish, and they can help individuals with situations such as infinite grief. I'd like to thank you for listening to this video today, and like to also encourage you, if you are experiencing this type of grief, to reflect on some of the things that we covered in regards to human happiness, in regards to what infinite grief is in itself, and how you can better relate to it and understand how it is affecting your life. Have a good day, and thank you for listening.